6:33 p.m. Monday, September 21st. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. I'm going to ask people who are not actually going to be speaking initially to mute themselves and then unmute themselves when they are on the agenda to speak. I will start asking if anybody has any public comment they want to make on any items that are not on the agenda. And I know that we have one of those already because I received an email saying that somebody wanted to speak.
Eli, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, Gary.
At the beginning of the pandemic we were still in the middle of, the state passed some sort of legislation to put aside local laws, which a lot of us didn't understand. It seemed like an overreaction. From what I've learned, as of July, the state gave the towns the right to reinstate local laws, such as the plastic bag ban, which many of us worked hard on to get passed. It was passed for good reason, and I think it's a source of pride for our town. We were one of the first towns to ever do this. Maybe this is more a question towards Greg or town council if they're present, but what is your perception of what we can do regarding this? From what I understand, as of July, the towns could tell the merchants that they want to reinstate the laws, the plastic bag ban law, and give them 30 days or 60 days to go through their stocks to set things up the way they were prior to COVID. A business like Crosby's shouldn't need anything over 30 days, in my opinion, because they're part of a chain, and they actually told me years ago they can easily shuffle around their supplies. Do you have any response to this?
So the board hasn't taken this up yet. It's something which has been on my horizon to come back to and go around and query the businesses and see what their status is. So I think that that's probably what we'll do is we will, as we go into the fall here, we'll take some time to inquire from the businesses what their actual state is, and then see about switching us back over to the pre-COVID requirements that the bylaw had. Greg, do you have any input on this?
So they did announce that reusable bags are fine. So people can be using those, and yes, we can reinstitute the plastic ban as far as I know. So that's something you could take up at your next meeting.
From all the research we did when we instated the law, we learned nobody has room for much stock, and most people didn't have more than a couple of weeks of supply of plastic bags. I would suggest you don't need to do a thorough research project on every single business in town that might have reverted back to using plastic bags. I would suggest that giving notice to all the businesses and a 30-day period should be more than sufficient from what I've learned from all the experience we've been through.
Okay. Well, we will take it up at one of our next meeting or two. Not going to make a decision tonight because this is not actually on the agenda, but we do appreciate you bringing it up, and we will take it on shortly.
Thanks for taking some action. A lot of people are concerned. Thank you.
And a question from John Lewis about the playground on the corner of Brook and Norwood. Go ahead, John. If you want to unmute yourself. okay.
Yeah.
So we certainly won't be taking that up or addressing that comment. All right, I'm going to move on into the first agenda item. So we had a public hearing scheduled, which we're passing over because the applicant withdrew the application. That was the entertainment license for Manchester Tennis. And so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is a discussion around the proposed tree policy. So I'm going to ask Greg to go into the details here, but I want to say a couple of things. We're limiting this discussion to about 10 minutes. The 2 points that we're going to cover here tonight, we're only going to cover 2 aspects of this, and that has to deal with the fines and how we may wish to proceed on the right-of-way issues. And we're not going to spend any more than about 10 minutes or so on this. So Greg, do you want to go into the details?
Sure, thank you, Eli. So first on the question of fine, so state statute does allow the tree warden to issue fines. They're $20 for violations of any regulations that we might have in place. And they allow a $500 fine for an unpermitted removal of a public shade tree. But that's through a criminal process. And you have to go through the courts to receive that kind of fine, to successfully receive that fine. To make it a non-criminal disposition, you would need to go to town meeting to have voters approve a set of fines and penalties that you could implement through basically a ticketing process. So that requires town meeting approval to have that done. So if you're interested in the ticketing approach to fines and penalties, you'll need to wait until a town meeting approval of a local bylaw. So you could bifurcate a possible regulation. You could go forward with a regulation now, which you can adopt. It's actually promulgated through the tree warden, and then you can adopt that on your own motion. And then if you wanted to go forward with a town bylaw approach in order to have the non-criminal ticketing process, then we could pursue that come next spring's annual town meeting. So that's sort of issue number 1. And then issue number 2 concerns defining the right-of-way. So we only have the authority to regulate trees that are within the prescribed town right-of-way. Right-of-ways are typically wider than the paved section of a road, and typically beyond the sidewalk. They are, for some roads, they are well-defined. For a lot of our roads, they are not well-defined, since many of our roads are quite old. I'm talking a few hundred years old. So we don't necessarily have good survey or meets and bound descriptions of all of our right-of-ways. The state statute does allow for a presumption of what the right-of-way is, subject to if a landowner can prove through their own deed and survey or research that the right-of-way is smaller or bigger than what we are presuming it to be, then they supersede what you generally think it might be. So it is okay, town council feels it is okay to pick a number beyond the pavement. Right now, the proposal is for 11 feet beyond the pavement to basically be the area where trees that fall within that space are designated a public shade tree. But just understand that it could be challenged, and it could be successfully challenged, that it might not be that wide, or it might be, in some cases, wider than that. So I just wanted to highlight that as a potential issue going forward. There are some other some editing and bringing the proposed bylaw that you took a look at your last meeting back in August. There's some editing that we need to do just to bring it into compliance with the tree law, which is Chapter 87 of the state statutes. Most of those are not very major. It's pretty minor editing. But these were the two issues that I wanted to get some feedback on before we proceed with a new version.
I'm going to annoy Eli and bring up a slightly different issue. In the town center and along some roads, it's very clear what is a deliberately planted town tree. In other areas, Norway maples, I love trees. I like almost all trees. I don't like Norway maples, just as an aside. Norway maples have seated themselves in thickets, and I have a great deal of trouble understanding why I should replace a tree, because I'm taking it out because it's blocking other trees. I think this is something that has more applicability downtown than it does in more rural parts of town.
Okay. So rather than debating that tonight, since we have limited time, I'm just going to ask that Friends of Manchester's trees, FOMT, take that comment and discuss it, but not at this meeting tonight.
I have two questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
First question is, Greg, you mentioned that there was a $500 cap under state statute for a fine that would be imposed unless it went through town meeting. If it goes through town meeting, can that fine be as stated in the proposed policy, which is $1,000?
No, it would have to be limited to the 500 as well, because that's what the statute allows. If it's a non-criminal, we'll have to double check with town council. So the ticketing process, the non-criminal disposition of violations is limited to $300. So I'm not sure. I'll have to double check with council if we could go to the 500. But I know that 500 is as high as we can go.
So a developer could come in and take out town trees and only be charged $300 a tree maximum if this went through town meeting?
Well, I'll have to double check. We may be allowed to do the 500 per tree.
Okay, even 500 seems like it's not going to stop some developers from going ahead with that.
I'll double check with council on that, but my understanding, my conversation with them was that we were limited by what the statute allows.
Okay, and in terms of your delineation of the policy saying that it's 11 feet that's being claimed as the right of way, that's not the way the policy reads to me. There's two designations, and the first one is town tree, which is anything within 6 feet of the street side. And then the extra 5 feet that makes up the 11 feet would be quote unquote protected trees as defined in the policy, 8 inches in diameter at breast height.
So the statute,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the statute doesn't recognize such a distinction. So the statute gives us authority for what are called public shade trees. And those are all the trees within the town right of way. So they don't make the distinction that is being tried to be made in the proposed policy. So what I went to the 11 feet, assuming you still wanted to try to protect to that limit. And you can do so if you make the presumption that that 11 feet beyond the pavement falls within the town right of way. And you could make the distinction about different size trees if you want to use the 8-inch diameter as a demarcation between what's protected and what isn't. You can certainly do that. But we can't make a distinction between the 6 feet and the 11 feet per se in terms of those two proposed categories. Statute only recognizes one category of public trees.
Greg, I have a question. So really, we're talking about that extra 5 feet, which may or may not necessarily be entirely public land. It may infringe on private land in some instances, correct?
It may, or we may actually have a wider
Okay,
right of way.
if it's wider, then it doesn't make any difference. That's fine.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to ask questions. That's a public decision. Have there been issues that have come up in, say, the past 2 or 3 years where there's been questions or concerns about, overlapping that right of way, that 11 feet overlapping into private land where there's a tree that maybe the owner wants to do one thing and the public wants to do something else?
So I would say we probably, in terms of the types of concerns or issues that arise, we probably are dealing more with people who want to claim that it's a town tree so that the town is responsible
Yes,
for keeping it.
I understand. They
yeah.
want to unload it, yeah.
Yeah, they want to unload it. So I would say that's probably more the case.
How does she know that?
Rather than us wanting to
You've got the video on.
not have access to a tree.
Okay, so my question in that situation, of course, and I'm aware of at least one instance in that situation, then the town has to decide, are we going to take it down or not? Maybe the tree's dead, okay?
Right.
It may or may not be endangering any structures, but it's up to the town to decide what they want to do.
Correct. And if it's as a public tree, before we take it down, there has to be, well, actually, there doesn't have to be a hearing. There's a little nuance here. The tree warden does have the ability to take down a tree that is in imminent danger, but if the tree warden actually has the authority to hold his or her own hearing, and then if anyone objects at the tree warden's hearing, then it can be kicked up to the select board.
All right.
We, in the past, have always just combined those two hearings just for simplicity's sake, but you don't have to. You could actually hold 2 different hearings.
Okay, so expanding to that extra 5 feet, what that does is that would put more responsibility on the town for more trees.
Correct.
Which we would then have to maintain, and if they're sick or dead, or if there's a problem or issue, it's our responsibility. Okay.
Yes, and the converse of that is that we're able to avoid people taking down those trees.
That's right. I mean, that's the flip side of that.
That's the plus side.
Your indication is most instances, or at least the instances you recall, it's people that say, hey, can you take care of this?
Right.
Yes. Okay.
I think it's also important to recognize in this whole issue of people asking to have trees taken down and how wide is the zone, is that up until the last year or so, there was a presumption of a 10-foot zone by the Department of Public Works. And that this policy was brought out, my understanding was that this policy was brought out to clarify what the zones are and how they work.
You're right, Jim. So I think
So it's not like, John, that there's this enormous expansion of the town zone.
No, no, I don't think that's the case. I'm just wondering how many people want to do something. Um, you know, whether they're looking for the town to do things rather than that they want to do something themselves.
I'd like to add, I have a question and also one point to the tree policy. It also enables the town to properly prune and maintain the trees, thereby extending the life of the trees. So hopefully there will be fewer trees needing to be taken down. But I think that was also one of the points of the tree policy. However, I did have a question, and I guess this goes to you, Greg. Does this also equally apply to private roads, of which we have many?
No, it does not apply to public road, private roads.
Private roads. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Eli, could I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Gary.
I seem to remember reading a law in the state of Massachusetts where if somebody maliciously took down a neighbor's tree or a tree blocking their view, that they had to pay a fine based on a multiplier of the retail value of the square footage of the tree, something like 5 times the street value of the tree, which was a substantial amount. Unless you had a fine of some substantial amount, people will just pay, as was stated earlier, to do what they want for their own personal purposes. I suppose Greg will look into that.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I'm happy to do a little more research. You know, that might be a formula that's used in private litigation.
Eli, may I say something on behalf of Friends of the Trees?
Yes, you may.
I just wanted to set a context for what the tree policy is. And I think Becky touched on it a bit, which is, and Jeff as well, we were trying to codify what existing practice had been. And there had been, I think, as you may recall, a few over the last 6-9 months, hearings that are, I mean, we're a little bit loosey, where the principles, let's say, of decision-making were far from crystal clear. So the policy's attempt is to make things clearer, to get it in writing, and the boundary that is clear for town trees is the 6-foot boundary. The boundary for so-called protected trees, which goes from 6 feet to 11 feet, is essentially an opportunity for us to figure out what is a tricky thing. It's because everything goes through the town tree warden, but it's an attempt to learn how we can implement things where there's a tree in that zone, maybe on private land, that has a benefit that's a public benefit. And so to figure out, get the situations clearly in focus and figure out. And what Jeff said is there were two different boundaries. One was a 5-foot one and one was a further one. We did look at a number of other town ordinances, and some have boundaries that are as wide as 20 feet from the edge of the street. So we were just attempting to do to clarify what the rules were here in town.
Right. Because people like to have concrete things that they can measure to assess whether or not they have an issue that they will need to fix. And so one of the options, I guess, was to simply say the tree that's within the right of way needs to be covered by this policy, but then everybody's going to ask, well, what's the right of way? And then it becomes vague. So that's the point of the policy. And the issue is whether or not being very specific is going to cause us some more downstream legal headache than another policy. Is that fair to say, Greg?
Yes, you need to sort of balance that. Those are the competing interests there.
So the 6 foot, the initial 6 foot, there's really no ambiguity or question about that. That's clearly going to be within the right of way in all circumstances. And the question is, in some of these other cases, would the right of way actually extend out as far as the 11 foot distance? Is that fair?
Yeah, so
Oh, sorry, Greg, go ahead.
well, either way. So part of the problem is that roads don't necessarily go down the middle of the right of way. You know, over time, a road may shift to one side of the right of way versus the other. So there may be cases you find out that the road is actually on the very edge of the right of way. But we just, you know, to do that kind of research is almost impossible to do it exhaustively and extensively.
Right.
So this presumption is logical, and council was comfortable with the 10 to 11 foot presumption, just with the understanding that if someone comes along and says, no, I have concrete evidence that my private land is within 3 feet of a paved area, we'll have to concede that, assuming that we believe the evidence is credible.
Okay. Well,
and there is another provision of law, just to complicate it a little bit. With owner's permission, you can go 20 feet beyond the right of way and still call it a shade tree, a public tree. But it does take the private landowner's permission to do that.
yeah.
Can we,
take it on? So,
Eli,
yeah, go ahead, Becky.
is it possible to make or not, that is it possible? Would it make sense to make 2 slight modifications to the 11-foot protected tree zone to say, unless town town right of way extends further or by permission of the property owner or specific permission?
There you go.
We could. I think that potentially muddies the waters again.
Mm-hmm.
So
I really think you need to stick to the statutory definition of a public tree. So that is any tree within the town right of way, or
Okay.
up to 20 feet beyond if the private owner has given permission.
So drop the 11-foot delineation in this document?
No, you can keep the 11 foot, but I would drop the protected tree classification. It would just be a public tree, and the public trees are either within the public right of way, and we're presuming that to be 11 feet or whatever number you settle on, but you presume it to be 11 feet beyond the pavement. Or it's a tree that the landowner has given permission for the town to declare a public tree that's within 20 feet of that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's 20 feet. It's within 20 feet of that 11-foot line.
Wow.
So it's actually 31 feet back from the pavement.
Oh, gosh. You know what, may I make a suggestion? Because I know, Eli, you were trying to confine the time here. Can we get together with you, Greg, and do some tweaking of the draft and get it, I forget who said bifurcate it, but pull out the fines and just get the policy in decent condition and get it back to the board, maybe for the next meeting or the meeting after, given the discussion tonight. It's very helpful to hear people's concerns.
Yeah, I think that's fine. It would be very helpful just to hear, is the board comfortable with the presumption approach?
I'm comfortable with the presumption approach, provided that the real intent here is that the policy is explicit about what our presumptions are, what the distances are, so that we don't end up immediately having to, answer other questions that require significant research. Yeah, I think it's going to cause us some, one way or another, we're going to run into some headaches on the edge cases and the gray areas. I know that.
Sure. But you do now.
Right. But I still think it'll benefit everybody if there's some well-defined distances that they can measure and say, yeah, I need to pay attention to what's going on here. I think that's important. I'll make one other comment. I know some members of the Finance Committee are going to want to hear some information about these distances and the impact that they may have to the potential financial impact they may have. So this policy is going to have to run through Finance Committee for some comments as well. Other members of the board?
I think it merits going, keeping going on this.
Jeff?
I do as well.
John?
Yes, especially those definitions. They need to be more specific.
Ann?
Yes.
All right, we'll do another iteration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to the agenda item number 3, a public hearing for conduit construction on Summer and Beach Streets for National Grid. May I get a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
All right. Okay. So this is work on Summer Street down by Beach Street. National Grid, who do we have from National Grid tonight?
Hey Eli, it's Matt.
Hi, how are you?
We have
I'm
a lot
good.
larger with Lidos as well.
Okay. Want to give a brief explanation of what the project is?
Sure. So for this, we need to install one manhole, and it's going to be roughly 330 feet or so of conduits on Summer Street towards Beach Street. We have a substation over there, and we're going to be reconductoring our feeders in the area. It's part of our continued Manchester by the Sea reliability and area improvement plan. This is just one part of it, but for this part, it's going to be installing a manhole in between 2 existing manholes and installing that new conduit system, the new duct bank there.
Okay. Well, I'm all in favor of continuing to improve our reliability, obviously. I know that the one comment we had from the DPW is that particular stretch of road is very heavily trafficked. There were 2 requests there. One was that the work began after Columbus Day, and that we consider doing it as night work because of the amount of traffic that goes through there. Is National Grid okay with those 2 constraints?
So just to be clear, that would be starting after Columbus Day, and you would prefer if it was night work?
Yep.
I think that Lyle, do you have any feedback on that?
I think that, yeah, that should be given the expectations, at least on my end, in completing design deliverables. That's as long as it's all right with you, Matt.
As far as it being night work, it's not necessarily a decision that I can make. That would be coming from an underground manager as far as how they would be able to schedule the work to be able to do that. I believe our civil crews would be able to work at night to install the manhole and so forth. Lyle, this would just be for the civil portion. I guess it wouldn't necessarily involve our underground quite yet until cable pulling.
Correct. Yes.
All right, then I would have to imagine so. I think that would be all right. I can talk with the civil contractor. Were we using Caruso McGovern for that? Wow.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The civil contractor to install the manhole and the conduit system, is it going to be Caruso McGovern?
That's what I've been hearing. Yes.
Okay. That is something I can confirm with them, but I do believe that would be all right.
Yes. That
Eli,
should be.
may I ask two questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
One is, how long is this anticipated to take? And I did notice that DPW wanted to know how many conduits and if they are concrete encasing.
There are 8 5-inch conduits, and they will be carrying primary. So yes, they will be concrete encased.
And how long do you anticipate the work to take?
I'm not even sure. I would just purely be guessing.
I'm just asking in terms of a time frame for, you know, after Columbus Day and night work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other board members?
Yeah, I have a question. So this road will be passable, except of course when you're working on it at night. Otherwise, every day it will be passable. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, they would do their very best to make sure that
Yeah, you put
possible during daytime.
metal plates or whatever. Yeah, there's no detour that's involved.
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay.
Oh, one other question was, will this be restricted to the roadway or will any sidewalks be involved?
Strictly within the edge of pavement or the curb to curb. So all within the paved roadway.
Thank you.
What about passability during construction itself? I mean, that's a major thoroughfare for our little burg. It has an impact on businesses downstream going towards the beach, and businesses along Summer Street.
Correct. So Matt, I guess it would depend on how the contractor actually lays out their movement of traffic plan and how they sort of phase it out. I can't speak to how particularly they would approach that. But we do recognize it's as you mentioned, a highly trafficked area. So very important to keep it as open as possible.
It also depends on what we mean by night work. I mean, I hate to push contractors to have to go really late, but things really quiet down later on. Certainly after businesses are closed.
You have hours that you define yet?
No, I have no hours. This is a conversation that I'm going to have with our civil contractor. The night work aspect of it was not something that was brought to my attention. So as far as it being night work, I don't foresee them having a problem doing it as night work. But for time frames and passability on the road during and after, I don't have much of answers for you.
It feels to me like we have a few unknowns here that we would like to get sorted out. A tighter information on the timeframes and to be sure that the contractor is comfortable with the commitments that we're asking for, and to get a little bit more information about the duration of the project. And perhaps a little bit more clarity on how traffic flow would be impacted during the work period, even though it might be at night. Just because of the high impact and tight nature of the area that you're going to be working in. And I wonder if it would be appropriate for us to continue this hearing to our next meeting and give you a little bit of time to go and collect that information and make sure that we're not approving something that you guys are going to have issues with or are going to want to make changes to. It might just be better for you to have a chance to talk to the contractors and then come back to us. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yes, I agree with you, Eli. I think it would be beneficial if I could get the answers from the contractor so that all of us are clear all the way around.
Okay.
Just
So-
for me to be able to ask these questions, so you guys would like to know the time frame, if they can start after Columbus Day, and passability of the road during the day and in the evening.
Yeah. And then get some commitment or get some time windows when contractors, what the definition of night work actually would be. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9, whatever.
Okay.
And so I will make a motion to continue before the hearing, but before I do that, are there any comments from the public? This is a public hearing. Anybody there has an axe to grind on this is free to make comments. So if you do want to make a comment, unmute yourself, identify yourself, and ask to be recognized. All right, there'll be an opportunity to make additional comments from the public at the next time, when we take this hearing up again. I'll make a motion to continue this public hearing to our next meeting on October 5th.
Yes.
So-
We have to have a specific time, correct, Greg?
Yes.
So actually, should we say 6:30? Now, I'll preface this by saying, yeah, I'm actually not going to be at that meeting. So Jeff, it's all yours. So
Thanks, Eli.
I'll let you select the time there.
Okay, 6:30.
6:30. 6:30.
We'll
Okay.
take it right off the start so that they don't have to wait around and
Mhm.
we can get on to.
All right. So that's my motions to continue the public hearing until 6:30 p.m. on October 5th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Board members, roll call vote. Mr. Bob Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Okay, thanks everybody, and we will see you for, well, I won't see you, but there's the other board members will see you on October 5th.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Okay.
Yep.
Look forward to it.
Okay, we're going to move on to some committee interviews for, one, two, three, yeah, four committee interviews. We're going to do the interviews for these folks. They're not going to make decisions on these positions at this meeting. We'll make the decisions at a subsequent meeting. And the four that we're going to be taking tonight are Leslie Beatty, and you can correct me on the pronunciation of your names when for the Welcome to Manchester Committee, ML Benali Dip for the DIP, Allison Sellers for Conservation Commission, and Lee Scharf for Sustainability. And I am going to take Lee Scharf first because, well, we've been hoping to speak to her for some time now, and I see that she's still here, and I'm for sure going to make sure we get it done this time. So Lee, you've unmuted yourself. If you could go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interests here, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lee Scharf. I have been a resident of Manchester for over 30 years. I have no expertise in sustainability, but I recently completed a research project on the climate change attitudes of the residents of Manchester by the Sea. So I have some in-depth knowledge as to how the town is thinking and acting in regards to sustainability issues and specifically climate change. So I'd love to join this committee, and if anyone has any questions, welcome.
Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and move things along quickly and say, Jeff, you're first.
Okay. Lee, this is, I think, the third time that you've been scheduled to come up to bat. And the question that comes to mind is, what about your availability for sustainability committee meetings and work outside the committee?
I just recently started a graduate program, and
God bless you.
my classes happen to meet on Mondays and Tuesday evenings. I have spoken to the committee about that. I have plenty of free time outside of those 2 evenings. They usually meet on Thursday nights, so I think we're okay.
Thank you.
Becky.
I know Lee, I think she'd be great. I have no questions.
John Round.
Yes, Lee. And Lee, thanks for raising your hand on this. We love hands that get raised.
Yes.
A lot of times there aren't enough, but that's great. So it's good to hear that you did some sort of a survey, I guess, of interest, the level of interest in the town for sustainability. And you seem to have a strong interest in this. Were there other pursuits that you've done in this particular area, or I know it's not in your professional background, but
just in my own personal life.
okay.
I have some adult children who have been very involved in this, so I have some background knowledge of all of this.
Built-in survey there.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Harrison.
I can only echo Becky's comments. I know Lee, I think she'll do a great job.
Thank you, Ann.
Okay. Okay. So, Lee, do you compost?
Yes, I do.
I think that's actually going to be my only question for you.
I do more than that, actually.
Well, that's okay. I'm going to stick with that one. Like a qualifier question. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for coming in. It's nice to finally have you here and able to speak before us.
Thank you. It's nice to finally be able to be here.
Okay. Let's move on then. We'll go to Allison Sellers for the Conservation Commission. I will say that we have another applicant also interested in CONCON. That person is not going to be able to interview until October 5th. So our decision here may drift out a little bit, but let's do our interview here regardless. So Allison, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself and tell us about your interest in the Conservation Commission, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. So my name's Allison Sellers, and I have lived in Manchester for 7 years. And actually, we recently bought in Manchester, and so very exciting. And so I am eager to get involved. And Henry Ottinger, who is on the Conservation Commission, reached out because he knows my personal interest in conservation and protecting the environment. And so he encouraged me to apply. And so to give you a little background of what interests me in environmental protection. So actually growing up, my mom was I grew up down south. And so there are different organizations and entities that do this sort of work. And so she was a supervisor for the Soil and Water Commission in the town that we grew up in. And so I spent my childhood like going after school and like measuring trees and documenting them. And she actually ended up founding a nonprofit in our town also around protecting trees, and gleaning was a part of it. So we would like take oranges and pecans from trees and give them to people in need. So this has been something that I've spent my life, in my personal life, really working toward the advocacy and protection of the environment. And so I'm eager to give back locally for something that I see as, helping out the larger community and world. And so in that way, I feel like it's really meaningful work that you could do locally.
Okay. So board members, Jeff.
I have no questions. She sounds perfect for the position.
Becky.
That's wonderful. Love the enthusiasm. Just question about time. If you would, if you have any other obligations that might impact your time availability.
Sure. So I met with Chris Bertoni about a week or two ago to talk about the time commitment, given that this it would require learning a lot around the regulations and what that would look like. And she mentioned, meeting every 3 weeks and then on occasion meeting on site and all of that. And so based off of everything that she shared, I definitely have enough time for it. I work at Brookwood, so I'm local and I have school hours. And so I would have no problem with the time commitment.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you again for the enthusiasm. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Ann Harrison.
Again, thank you for the enthusiasm. It's a lot of work, and not everybody is going to appreciate your efforts, but good luck.
Thank
John
you.
Brown.
Yep, I'm good. I like the excitement that you're that you're kind of giving off here, Allison. I think you'd be a good fit. And yes, it does take a lot of work, but it sounds like you're happy to dive in. Thank you.
Okay, so Allison, you may have partly answered my questions. You spent some time talking to Chris Bertoni about the time commitments and a little bit of the work that's done. Are you familiar with the types of hearings and the nature of how those hearings are managed in the state of Massachusetts?
So, I mean, a surface level, I think. So it's not only in regard to public land around wetlands, but also private land and the hearings around the construction around water. And so she described, she gave me a whole bunch of different scenarios of the different sort of hearings that would come to the committee. And so she mentioned what the kids that I work with call Stinky Beach. I'm not sure what the name is, but the beach on Harbor Ave, like around by Tux Point. And she said that there is construction to rebuild that wall and how that's what the Conservation Commission is looking at right now. But then in a given month, you might also end up at a person's home surveying a particular area where they want to build close to water. And so that's my understanding, is that it's really a broad look at protecting both open spaces and waterways and how it plays in with state and federal regulations. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
So the point being is that it is a quasi-judicial position, and decisions you make end up being, binding in some respect on residents, as opposed to advisory in nature to the Board of Selectmen. Slightly different animal. Wanted to make sure you were aware of that and understood that up front.
Yes, I was aware of that. And in a way, I actually took solace in that there are, black and white regulations that would be enforced versus the sort of, when a group comes together, like my neighbor is on the Historic Commission and she shares some of the stories around that. And I feel like that could be subjective and could require multiple conversations, where this is enforcing a regulation. And so in that way, I feel confident in being able to have conversations and make decisions around that.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So thanks very much for coming in, and also for your enthusiasm. That's very much appreciated. And like I said, we'll be making a decision at a subsequent meeting.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Allison.
Night.
All right. Let's move on to Amal Benali, and you can correct my pronunciation. Please do. This is for the Downtown Improvement Project Committee. Amal, are you there? Could you unmute yourself?
I'm not sure if we have it. We never got confirmation.
Oh, all right. Well, she can come in, or they can come in at a different point in time and correct my butchering of their name. Leslie Beatty.
Yep, I'm here. It's actually pronounced like Warren Beatty, but no relation, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us your interest in the Welcome Manchester Committee.
So similar to Allison, where she is somewhat of a newcomer to Manchester, I've been here with my husband full-time just for 5 years. But I did have a head start. We started coming in the summer 7 years before that. But it took me a while to just kind of find my footing, let's say. And as a librarian and back in Dallas, I drifted naturally to the library here and got my feet wet just by getting to know the librarians and some of the patrons and things like that. And so it would be nice to actually have a connection with the newcomers to the town that maybe wouldn't take quite so long as it did for me to find opportunities, find places to volunteer, find groups and that I would be interested in joining. I've done all that at this point, not all of it, of course, but I could see that, we probably need help in introducing new families to Manchester, and maybe even producing some sort of brochure to give to them that has different ideas of where to turn to for questions and for, like I said, resources and volunteer places and groups and things like that.
Okay. Well, let's go with Jeff again.
Pole position. Your experience echoes other people who have applied for the position on welcoming committee, the positions, because there's several open. That you found your way, but it would have been better to have a little bit of support in doing that. And I think that's a really important qualification, that you have this experience that you would like to help other people improve upon. So my only question would be about availability.
Honestly, I have not checked. I believe that Beth Whalen is also on this committee. So we'd be working together, and we already work together at the Manchester Historical Museum, so it'd be easy to coordinate. But due to the fact that there were various openings on this welcoming committee, I wasn't at all sure whether it was already going or whether they were waiting for enough people to make it happen.
I think the issue there is that it has been going in the past and has been depleted of members and is less involved with newcomers. So it's a building, a stocking up again.
Got it. And I'd be happy to take that on.
Thank you.
Becky.
Leslie, thank you. It's as Jeff said, you are saying some things that we've also heard recently from others. And with that, you would bring a very good perspective, what needs addressing and how best to address that for the newcomers to town. Jeff asked the question I would just like to say thank you very much for putting your hat in the ring and also for being over at the Historical Museum.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Ann Harrison.
Can you give me, you found your way into town through the library. What other paths would you suggest for people?
If a family has school children, that it'd be fun to introduce a family to another who has children the same age, but also the garden club, some of the other groups that work directly with the town in terms of, oh gosh, the volunteer groups made up of people that raise money for scholarships. Also for stores and volunteer opportunities and things like that, kind of all over town that sometimes need to be unveiled. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. Thank you for offering.
Oh.
John Round.
Yes, thank you. And hello, Leslie. How are
Hi,
you doing?
John.
Good. Leslie and I both serve on as board members on the Historic Museum. And yeah, I read the little blurb on your background, which I think is quite ideal for this. Others here have spoken about some of the other people that we've heard from with regard to this this committee and coming into town and not knowing where to turn. And as a librarian, your resource capital R. And that's what a lot of these people need. They come across and they say, I didn't know about this. I didn't know that this is the way this was done. How do you do that? These are all little pieces of information that, make a person feel more comfortable when they first move into town. And I know that you'll probably go to work on really compiling, here are all of the things you need to know to get comfortable in Manchester. So it's a skill set that would be very, very welcome to that committee. So thank you.
Okay. So Leslie, my questions actually have already been answered by the previous questions from board members. So I am all set. I don't have any other further questions for you.
Okay.
Thank you for throwing your hat in the ring. And like I said, we will be making the actual decisions at a subsequent meeting. We'll let everybody know.
Great. Well, please say hello to Penny for me. We met at the library.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda. agenda item number 5, outdoor dining, enclosed tents and heaters, proposal for the mooring. Greg, do you want to hit the details on this one?
So the mooring has put in a request to put up a tent, a 10 by 20 tent over their outdoor dining area that's right out in front of their establishment. Subsequent to their submittal, we understand that the state has revised their guidelines, and they are allowing up to 4 sides to be placed, all 4 sides of a tent to be attached if a business so chooses. So that is a change from when we have last talked about tents. In this case, we'll need to make sure if the mooring would like to have all 4 sides up, we'll need to make sure though that the sidewalk still is open for pedestrians, so that at least a 3-foot plus area is maintained. So that'll be important. So fairly straightforward at this point. They have not proposed any heating for the tent. I did notice that they did have heaters out by the tables on my way home this afternoon. And so those heaters would not qualify as appropriate for an enclosed space. So we just need to hear from the folks at the mooring what if they plan to provide heat, and if so, that heating system will need to be approved by the fire chief.
Questions from board members? Oh, by the way, do we have somebody from the mooring here tonight?
All right.
I was thinking maybe one of the items said manager was such an individual, but apparently not. All right, questions from board members?
Eli, I have a couple of questions. And one pertains to the pedestrian walkway. I'm not sure which sides they're proposing putting up on their tent, but if they put a side up that is on the opposite side of Manchester by the Book, how are pedestrians to get through? I see people could perhaps walk around the lamppost, but I don't think a wheelchair could get around that lamppost. That's one of my questions. And the other is, has the Board of Health weighed in on this?
So we don't have, I know they haven't reviewed it as a full board. They did provide the comments about the sides being allowed now. That was part of a call they had with the state on Friday. And we're supposed to be getting written materials from the state sometime this week about that. But I think you're right, Becky, that's the pinch point on the sidewalk, on that,
right.
On that western edge there. By the lamppost, and if a side is going to be put there, I think it'll have to be pulled back a bit to enable appropriate width.
Sorry.
So are we expecting something more than the memo that was included in our packet from the Board of Health?
Yes, we will. We'll be getting the written new guideline, the updated guideline from the state. And they'll also provide some comments similar to what they did on the for counts. So yes, they would be providing some additional input.
Okay. We don't have any idea of how high this tent is. and also how the curb meets ADA, going over the curb and into the eating area meets ADA.
Does it need to?
That was an issue that we raised in the very beginning of all of this. And I'm thinking about Collins is overlapping the curb as well.
I thought the ADA requirement was for people to pass on the sidewalk and not necessarily have ADA access into the dining area. Am I mistaken?
If you're asking me that question, I'm not sure of the answer. Although I know that there has to be ADA accessibility within a restaurant. I'm not sure what the specific regulations are.
So now that so initially the outdoor dining was prior to any indoor option. Now that there is indoor seating, the ADA accommodations can be met through the indoor seating. And so there's not a specific requirement
Okay.
that the outdoor dining has to, it would be preferred that at least one seat, one table is ADA outdoor, just to have equity there, but it's not a mandate.
Okay. Then the final issue that I have is whether we have a written assent to this from Manchester by the Book. When I add up the footing and I look at the actual site, it seems to me that that 20 feet is going to substantially block the window at Manchester by the Book. So the question is whether he's been notified about this change and whether he's okay with it. We did this with Collins with the stock exchange, and my concern is how it impacts Manchester by the Book. So just a friendly letter from them would be perfect. As we had requested of Collins with stock exchange.
Yeah. Other board members?
I agree with Jeff on that. We did not hear from Manchester by the Book when the spaces were first set up for the mooring, I don't think. Maybe there was some dialogue between them. I would think that would be probably a bigger issue than with the tent. In other words, I think the tent's probably okay, because if there were concerns, that probably would have come up when the spaces were taken by Manchester by the Book back 2 months ago. But we should hear from them. You're right.
We have a comment from Chief Cleary. Jason, you want to go ahead?
Sure, just one item about the tent. If they are putting up 4 sides at any point, then it does become an enclosed structure. And then it has to have certain egress requirements met. And also the possibility of needing fire extinguishers and exit lighting, depending upon the side. But egress paths and tent openings have to be evaluated if they do go with 4 sides.
Have we heard any indication from them about since the state changes requirements on 2 sides versus 4 sides? Have we heard any input from the mooring about whether or not they were going to be doing or would be wanting to do 2 versus 4 sides?
I don't believe we have, no.
Other board members?
I have a concern about the height and the extent to which that tent will block the sight lines around the intersection between Union and Beach. The people coming up and turning. It'd be nice to see some of the materials that Callis has presented us with.
So a bit of a simulation of the view.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Also, were they planning on using solid or transparent sides?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Also, do we know how they would be securing the tent? Will there be poles outside of the barriers? I mean, I know there's one outside a barrier at Cala's, but this part of the road is already seems a little tight.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the poles were all inside the barriers. It was a 10-foot wide pole tent that they proposed. So it was not extending over the barrier.
Thank you.
All right, so it sounds like there's still a few questions that need to be answered by the morning. I'd love to be able to give some sort of conditional approval, but I think that's going to be kind of hard to do since we can't talk to them here tonight. And I think the nature of the questions is there's too many of them open to be able to do a conditional approval tonight. What do the other board members think?
I would agree with that. You know, I had hoped that they would show up at this meeting so that we could ask them the questions directly.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yep, sure.
So we can watch the weather, and if it's not going to be particularly cold for the next week or so. And if it's going to snap really cold, then we could consider injecting a short meeting to discuss any requests from them if they got all their ducks in a row. But in the meantime, we can work with them to get a more detailed proposal and touch on some of the points that the fire chief raised and see whether or not they're planning on doing 2 versus 4 sides. Still not sure how I feel. Does any Greg? Do we know why what drove the state to shift to 4 sides being okay versus 2 sides?
So basically, the state logic was, well, we've allowed interior seating as long as the tables are, spaced appropriately. And so they didn't feel that it would be any different now having tents being basically enclosed as well, as long as certain minimums were met. That's my understanding of sort of the logic that the state was using. And they were realizing, that things are lasting longer, and they were trying to help out the restaurant business as much as possible, understanding that they can't have full capacity inside.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know to what extent we have more conservative in our authorizations than the state guidance on this. From my perspective, so if we went with the state's guidance of four sides being closed as legitimate, then basically it just creates another interior space with all the same issues an interior space has. It just they have more of it, so they can spread people out a little bit more. However, the tents that we have on the outside do not have people really significantly spread out. The reason why they're really there is separation, but it's still pretty dense compared to what we would want on an inside. restaurant. So for example, if I want to be careful. This is me personally saying this now. If you were to take, for example, this basic callus and wrap that in 4 walls, I wouldn't set foot in there. This is me personally. With it open, there's a massive amount of airflow and ventilation. And to me, it's a different proposition. It changes the tenor of what I thought for the good of the town is what we were trying to achieve, namely a space that people would be more comfortable and safer in. Because if all we're doing is creating an interior, essentially the equivalent of an interior space, then what? I mean, we should just remove the sidewalk dining and say, go ahead and go inside. I don't see, I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit. I don't quite know how to process this just yet.
I think part of the problem, Eli, is that the state has not put out clear regulations on what came up in on the phone on Friday. So we don't know what the regulations are.
Yeah, that's true.
Eli, I think additionally, you know, my indoor dining, they have at least some form of a ventilation system. Outdoors, if you're putting up sides, what do you have? You don't have ventilation.
So I should be clear, no one has asked for 4 sides at this point.
Right.
So we'll have to wait, but you're good to anticipate,
right.
anticipate the issue. But at this point, we don't have someone asking for that.
Then if we made an approval on a tent with 2 sides, then it would be incumbent on the applicant to then come back to us and ask for 4 sides.
Yes.
Close the remaining 4 sides, regardless of what the state guidance changes are. Still.
So that's correct. That's correct. So you've approved only 2 sides for callus, for example.
Can we make a request, not a request, but a provision in this that the end wall facing traffic, I assume coming into town, is clear? I think Ann's point and Becky's point about the traffic coming through there. Most of the dining that's going to go on now in the evening is going to be at dusk or dark. So lights will show of people coming around the corner in the opposite direction. But I think that we need to say that because of the location of this, that we need a clear wall on one end.
What does a clear wall on one end give you?
It gives you an opportunity to see lights coming up in the opposite direction.
Well, and if
it increases the lines of sight as opposed to a solid wall.
This is the drivers. This is the drivers you're talking about.
Yeah, for drivers.
Obviously.
Okay, so the clear wall faces a blank wall. You can probably see the lights through it anyway.
The clear wall, I'm talking about on the ends.
Yep.
In the line of traffic, where the traffic's coming in.
I think we probably want both of those, both ends to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, we could go that direction. But I definitely think at least one end.
I think we should see what they're proposing.
Thank you.
But I don't want them to have to come back a 3rd time.
Yes.
True. All right.
But I think Greg at this point understands enough about what our concerns are to not come back with something that's going to generate a lot more questions.
All right. Eli, did you see the chief's comment?
Oh.
Yeah.
Good.
Wow.
Not good.
No.
All right. Okay, thanks, Chief. You know, it is going to be an ongoing challenge for everybody. All right, so I think we can move on from this agenda item now. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to agenda item 6, COVID update in a fall beach use. So the Parks and Rec is staffing the beach into the beginning of October. And what's going to be happening after that is, well, October 15th, the dogs are allowed back on the beach. We have in place right now a policy which says the parking lot is open to residents only. And the question that's going to come up as things get colder, which is going to happen soon, probably, and we start getting more dog walkers and people are transitioning to just walking on the beach as opposed to dwelling on the beach. Is there a need for us to change our policy with respect to opening the parking lot to non-residents? We won't be able to control the beach from a practical standpoint after the Parks and Rec staff close down for the season. But we do have control over the parking lot still. So this is an opportunity for the board to begin that discussion. I use the word opportunity. Well, I don't know quite how I use it. Anyway, Greg, did you have any more detail you wanted to throw around this?
Not really. I think it sums it up pretty well. It's certainly keeping staff there, staff presence, beyond the end of the month does not seem practical. And the amount of traffic, I don't think would demand that. Obviously, beach use is much different in the off season as it gets colder. People are there for much shorter periods of time, a lot of coming and going. So it, from a staff perspective, it did not seem like a worthwhile endeavor to try to staff and have a presence there and to monitor.
Comments from the board?
Having a regulation or rule against out-of-towners in the parking lot and not doing anything about it makes me very uncomfortable. So either we send somebody around and ticket the cars periodically, or we just say, okay, fine, not residents only for the winter.
Yeah. Other board members?
Well, what is the policy been in past years in the winter?
It's been open.
It's been open. Anybody can go.
Correct.
Okay.
Isn't there a limitation of people who are non-residents parking alongside Beach Street?
Not enforced for sure.
It's not heavily enforced. In theory, it's the 2-hour limit.
So there's a 2-hour limit inside the parking lot for non-residents in that 10-car area.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about at the parking lot.
I'm talking about inside the parking lot. There's a non-resident area, which I don't believe that we use during the summertime because it's residents only during the summertime to come into the parking lot.
Correct, and we haven't traditionally enforced that in the off season. So it's non-residents typically are able to park anywhere in the parking lot.
Okay, there's a rabbit hole that we could dive down into here that I'm not sure that I want to go into. And that rabbit hole is dog walkers bringing large amounts of dogs that are people who are non-residents, have a business, and they bring large amounts of dogs to the beach during the dog season.
We have a bylaw wrapped around that, I believe. I thought we did put in place constraints on the number of dogs that one individual can bring in.
Yeah, my memory is it's you're allowed to have 2 dogs with you. Again, enforcement is not high.
Eli?
Yeah.
Sorry, I disappeared there for a minute. Am I interrupting anybody?
No, go ahead.
I guess my concern regarding the beach is that fact that the schools are not in they're meeting virtually, and many people are still working from home. I think that it would be responsible to maintain the beach for the use of the residents, as opposed to opening it up for wider use. That's how I feel at this point. We can actually have, we could perhaps get Chief Fitzgerald to weigh in on, keeping an eye on things down there.
With respect to the parking, you mean?
Yes.
Because I don't think anybody's proposing that the people are actually police the people on the beach. No, just the parking. And I'm also not implying that it's not being done at this point. I'm just saying that if we're going to say it needs to remain residents only, then we need to work to ensure that. You need to ticket people.
Yes.
Well, I think obviously we can set that as a policy, and we typically have we've wanted the police to ticket, and I think they do.
Yep.
Down there. Some people would prefer maybe that they be more draconian with that. I think the real question is whether or not we as a board, setting aside the issue of enforcement, whether or not that actually, if we presume that we're doing enforcement to enforce policy, from a policy standpoint, is there a point at which the board would feel comfortable making the parking lot available to non-residents, and if so, what point is that? Sounds like there's some reticence to do so currently, but does the board think that that should be revisited in November, December, January, when it drops below 12 degrees, 4 degrees? I'd like a little bit of guidance from the board.
I'm not adverse to opening it on October 15th to non-residents.
Yeah. We certainly revisit in at least a month, if not less. But
and then and then we can take a look at whether it's being abused and there's too many people on the beach.
I don't agree with that. I feel more comfortable leaving it as it is for now and revisiting in another month.
What's the load on the beach right now? It's not, I haven't been down there in
There's nobody down
couple of weeks. That would be my impression, but who's going to the beach when it's pretty cool?
Dogs are
So-
not allowed on yet.
Right, we know, and that'll change the scenario on October 15th.
Right.
But I'd be in favor of certainly looking back at it in the last part of October and seeing where we are. I don't know how that's going to change with residents when dog season opens.
When you say looking back on, do you mean approving?
Yes. In other words, not approving it now, but we don't know what's going to happen on October 15th, and I don't have a dog, so it's not like I've had experience in what happens when dog season opens. I'm sure.
What's the metric for the decision?
Yeah.
Right. I'm not debating dogs on the beach or not. I'm just debating who has access to it more readily right now. And I think that it should be the members of the town and perhaps the school age kids who are learning remotely and definitely need a good place to be outside.
My thinking is that, as Becky said, there are a lot of people home. I don't know how the parking lot changes when dog season comes and people start to walk their dogs. But if there are more people working at home, there are more people that are going to go down to the beach to walk their dog for a half an hour.
So usually what happens.
And I don't, none of us knows how that's going to evolve, but we'll know in the third week of October.
I'd like to just throw into the mix of this that our downtown businesses have requested all summer long that we open up the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, I ran a business in Rockport, and the day after Labor Day, it was like, forget it. There were 13,000 people a weekend before that, and after Labor Day, they were just residents. It's a big hit that the summer season is ending or has ended. Will officially end tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. But I think it's a better proposition to businesses to open the beach to non-resident dog walkers who may use some of our businesses and patronize them. I don't think that we're going to be, doing anything out of line with where we've been going all summer.
Jeff, where are the dog walkers going to put the dogs when they go shopping?
In the car.
The place that they always do, in the car.
I think we're getting a little, never mind. I understand what you're saying. And yes, I think it's important that we try to help the businesses. I think that's a little different. I think we still have Masconomo open for parking and all the street parking that's open as well. So I don't.
We don't have non-residents coming into town for other activities like going to the beach. So.
But do you think non-residents are going to go park at the beach and then walk from the beach up to town?
No, I think it's an impulse purchase. They're on the way back from the beach. The dogs are in the car, and they say, "I'm going to stop in and buy something."
That's right.
That's all. Nobody's walking in except on the beach.
But non-residents who don't have dogs may also walk on the beach. It's not just dogs that go to the beach.
That's true.
And the beach is beautiful, and we've constrained it all summer long because of clear concerns about COVID. But I think that those concerns have shifted.
And the fall, the nature of the use changes in the fall. It's not people interacting with each other and sitting in large groups for long periods of time and then crowding significantly the town. If you look at our beach usage during the winter months, in the colder months, you really don't see massive crowding of the town due to it. Now, I will say that in October, we sometimes do have very warm times, and every once in a while, you'll generate a significant number of people coming to the beach as a result. That is possible. But I do wonder. I don't. It's hard for me to see the metric that says we should not increase the access as things get colder, and we know that naturally the number of people using it and the nature of their use is going to shift. I don't quite see keeping such tight grips of that.
Greg, have you had merchants inquire about when the rules are going to change over the last couple of weeks?
Not the last couple of weeks, John.
Okay,
They
just wondering.
certainly were asking in August.
Yes. Okay. Oh, when they were asking in August, they were saying, "Hey, summer's coming to an end. You're going to open the ball, open everything up."
They were hoping for earlier, but at a minimum, that yes.
Okay.
All right. So here's the thing. This is September 21st. We have a meeting on October 5th, at which I won't be there. And then another meeting on the 19th? Yeah, 19th.
Yeah.
So if we're going to change policy here, we do it at one of those. If we're going to change policy, we do it at one of those meetings. If we want to consider having opening up access to the beach a little bit more. If you folks want to have that discussion on the 5th, I'm okay with that, but I won't be there, almost certainly. So part of me is thinking that we should have a vote tonight on it, see where it lands, and we just update ourselves on the 19th or as appropriate. So if we had a vote tonight regarding parking access to the parking lot, and we didn't approve it, we might, regardless of the metric for that, we might revisit it again in November or later October. Board members care to vote on this tonight, or do you want to go to the 5th or the 19th?
I'd like to vote on it tonight, and I move that on the 15th, we remove the resident-only restriction on the parking lot at the beach.
Second.
There's a comment from Mike in the chat. Significantly easier to delay the decision than it will be to change it back later on. Yes, that's true, but I think we're choosing not to delay the decision right now. And Todd Fitzgerald said, just to let everyone know, we have the beach staffed, weather permitting, through Columbus Day. Parking enforcement patrols make random checks and enforcement during the week. So that's just an FYI.
Did you see, I'm sorry, did you see the chief's comment, Chief Clary's?
Recommend in the short term that given the current drought conditions, we continue to prohibit fires on the beach and not issue any permits. That's fine. That's orthogonal to this particular discussion. The only discussion, so what we have right now is a motion to effective October 15th, remove the restriction of non-resident parking at the beach, and it's been seconded. So discussion. All right. Roll call vote. Mr. Bob Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
No.
Ms. Harrison.
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, so we're gonna try it out, and if we regret it, we will revisit it on the 19th and every, week after that. Keeping a watchful eye. And if other circumstances change in the state with respect, or locally with respect to our COVID numbers, we can also revisit it and will as needed. Okay. Moving on to liaison project updates. Item number 7 on the agenda. So I have no update from my end this time around. Jeff, open spaces and other items.
Okay, the Open Space and Recreation Committee advisory group is meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and I'll have more information about where the group is heading at our October 5th meeting. They've closed the survey that was open to the town after the public forum in August, and we should be looking at the data for that survey.
Okay. Any questions from board members on that? All right, and on telemeeting support.
Not much. There was a link to the meeting today, but there wasn't a link to the password. And with any luck, next time we won't all have to go someplace else and find the password.
Yep.
Yes. Duly noted.
So actually, on that point, a while back, so I don't want to diverge too much on this, but a while back, Anne, you'd made a comment about the town website and the business of when you look at the scheduled meeting items in the town website, in order to get to the documents of interest like the agenda, you have to click through like 3 different things to get to them. It's difficult, and I don't know if others got this too, but I got a letter late last week from a resident commenting on exactly this and a few other issues about the website. Is this something that we can address? I would like to see a calendar and a meeting calendar which has made things much more accessible, so you didn't have to know where to click in order to get the agenda and the other information related to the meeting. I find it frustrating, and I think that our residents are not well served by it.
Sure, let me work with Tiffany on that and see what we can do.
I think that we've already got it. We just need to get a link to the agenda that when you go into the calendar and you click on today and you click on Board of Selectmen, it tells you when the meeting is, gives you a link to Zoom. It tells you how to get to Zoom and that we need a password in there. But we could also have a link to the agenda.
That John and I have not quite well-defined areas. I thought John was working mostly on the website, and I was trying to figure out how not to drive Eli to pull out all of his hair on the Yeah. Zoom on meetings.
Yeah. I chatted with Tiffany on a couple of occasions on this back, I guess, in July or so. But it seems to me that this kind of falls into that category. And you know, Greg, you're going to work with Tiffany, and I can join that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, on this particular issue, it sounds like I don't think it would be that hard to make sure we have the
No,
password included
no.
and there's a direct link to the agenda.
Yeah.
So let me work with her on that.
I think we all got that note, and there were 2 or 3 points that this resident made.
Yeah. It might be an idea to try and get him just to send a list of things that are wrong, because it's really hard and tedious to go through a marginally structured website and find all of the redundant references that have to be updated. But if somebody were actually looking and saying, oh yeah, it's easy to fix, it's just tedious to find.
I am trying to get each department to take some responsibility here and make sure that they are monitoring their pages on a minimum on a weekly basis to make sure things are staying current. So we will continue to drive that.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Becky, on the planning board, the 40R, et cetera.
Yes, planning board met September 14th. Ron Mastrogiacomo will remain chair. Mary Foley will remain the clerk. They appointed or had the members of the planning board volunteer various liaison positions. There was a discussion with Peter Gordo and Mark Glovsky regarding the bylaws of the 40R area or limited commercial district. So they're going to, they being planning board, will create a study group regarding various aspects, height limits, allowed uses, setbacks, etc. Let's see what else. And that was really the bulk of it. They do have a 40R Smart Growth Overlay District Working Group meeting coming up, which is going to be the 24th of this month. And the link to that, if anybody's interested, is on the town website. Then the planning board met the next night for recodification. And they tightened up some wording, adding general definition for the ADUs, little work on affordable housing and affordability requirements, and just tightening up the wording for various aspects of the bylaws and the general bylaws. And there you have it.
Okay. So,
Becky, could I add a comment? Or
Eli.
Actually, Gary, could you just?
Okay.
So I know that the planning board has put the ADU proposal back into the mix for discussion, and touch on the time frames involved, because I know there's been perhaps some misconception about what the actual process is.
Mm-hmm.
It is the way this recodification process is going to work is once the planning board has finished its pass, and they will be doing so relatively soon, they will be having a few public forums to take public input on the entirety of the recodification, including the ADU updates, and then using that input to potentially make changes to what their proposals are, and then they'll have an actual public. And then the intent is that that would get, after the public hearings, which would happen probably in sometime in the winter, that it would get wrapped up into possibly into articles for consideration for the annual town meeting, under the presumption that we went through the public forums and the public hearings, and there weren't any gaping holes or other things that made us want to reconsider and delay things a little bit. So all aspects of the recodification, including the ADU, will be discussed by the public, and input will be taken. So this is a set of proposals that the planning board is making right now, and they're not actually final decisions. And to that end, I asked the chair of the planning board if the planning board and the board of selectmen could meet after they've finished the recodification, and the planning board could present the summary version of the recodification with the ADU proposal to the board of selectmen in advance of the public forums. And I asked if they could set that up for October 19th. They thought that that would fit within their timeline for finishing the recodification meetings and official public forum. So that's the tentative proposal right now. That will give us an opportunity to provide input on all those facets, and indicate to the planning board how we think the direction has been, and if we think there are going to be any sensitive areas that need to change, or if we generally are supportive and think that this is the right stuff. Of course, anybody will have the ability to comment at the public forums, but this will be something that it's my intent to take up on the 19th. Okay.
Thank you, Eli.
Comments, questions?
Looking at the website and the postings on the website, the meeting on Thursday, the 24th, that is not posted.
If you go to the town website, let me get on there. I just saw it there the other day. And if you type in 40R, 40R, and should come up, then you should then it'll go to the public forum. It says public forum to discuss. Do you see that? I don't know. It may not be on the calendar, but it's definitely on the town website. And perhaps this is another area of where we can work on making things more accessible. I'm not sure, but you just type in 40R and it comes up.
Yep. I'd say we need to do.
It's not an agenda posted in terms of the planning board itself.
No. It's
not a planning board meeting.
No.
It's a public forum.
It's a public forum that the committee is sponsoring.
And that's not on the calendar.
So, should it be? Sure.
Yep.
But not, again, not every where did we go? And he says there's a picture on the homepage.
Right. It's It's one of the bullets on the homepage.
I don't see it, but in any case, I do know it's there.
If you
I
scroll
guess
down.
it's difficult to put every single bullet up there, I suppose, but
So let's tell you what, let's not
right,
publish
perseverate.
the webpage right now. But suffice it to say, there's things that we would like to tweak. And
Yep.
Clearly, people have some concerns that we need to take into account here. Let's not get into a process for dealing with it too much tonight. But
Yes.
the message has been delivered, and
Yep.
Jeff and John can off the priority. All right, consent agenda. Board of Selectmen meeting minutes from August 17th and September 8th. Cal has a change of ABCC change of manager application and an item from Parks and Rec on the Memorial Bench program. Does anybody have anything that they want out of the consent agenda? Anybody have any?
I have a question related to the minutes, but it's not to pull it out of the consent agenda for it.
So,
But
go ahead.
we should go ahead with the consent agenda approval, and then I can raise that question.
So your question's not going to affect the.
No, it's a comment that Mr. Bowling made in the meeting about defining a process for. I'm trying to find it now.
Well, he looks.
Go ahead.
Well, he looks. There are 2 sets of minutes labeled April 17th.
Yeah, I agree.
Those have
saw
been
that.
changed. That's been fixed.
Okay.
Okay, so on page 6, paragraph 2, Mr. Bowling would like to define the mechanics to restart the process. This is in regard to speed limits and traffic issues. Gather public opinion, develop a plan. And I am wondering when we start to address that.
Okay, you're right. We can take that after we discuss the consent agenda. Or vote on the consent agenda. Anything else that people have on edits or comments on the consent agenda? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Bodmer Turner.
Yes.
Ms. Jakes.
Yes.
Ms. Harrison.
Yes.
Mr. Round.
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Now, as to the speed limits. So the last thing that we were going to do is we were collecting a little bit more data, the speed data from Todd.
We have some of that data now.
We have some of that data now, and we were going to present it at this meeting, and I did not put it on the agenda, and I apologize.
That's all right.
So
I
you
just want to
talked
make
about-
sure. I just want to make sure it doesn't fall by the wayside.
No, it won't, definitely not. And then the other discussion was around Mill Street, and likewise, that was going to be updated at a later date. So, my bad. I will get it back into the mix again. Okay, and in correspondence, we had a letter from Clean Harbors regarding a release notification on a cleanup. Does anybody, if anybody has any questions about that, I'd encourage them to talk to Greg or meet for a workshop. Anybody have anything that they want to talk about? Okay. Town administrator's report.
Thanks, Eli. Just to let folks know, I think we had a couple of folks from Calais. You're all set.
Okay, we are. I apologize. I was just sitting thinking, okay, I think the consent agenda just approved the vote.
Yes, so you're all set. You're welcome to stay on, but you certainly don't have to.
We appreciate it very much. Jennifer, you heard that. Thank you for your time.
I did. Thank you.
Good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Congratulations on your patience.
Thanks.
I appreciate your efforts and your volunteering for this board, so thank you. Take care.
So some updates on staffing. Today was Carol Muse's first day. She's our new assistant to the town accountant. And so Andrea's very happy to have that support for her efforts. She replaced Linda Ellis, who retired earlier this summer. So we welcome Carol and look forward to her getting up to speed and being a good asset in the accounting department. In the middle of reviewing resumes, we received roughly 36 resumes for the town clerk position. So we'll be going through those in the next couple of weeks, and with any luck, be presenting to you a recommendation for ratification in the not too distant future, depending on how the process plays itself out, but certainly aiming for a recommendation to you by the end of October at the latest. We do have the mediation scheduled for a police union. We're before the JLMC, which is the Joint Labor Management Commission. We're scheduled to be with them on October 13th and are hoping for a productive day of mediation with the facilitator that they are providing. So that is going forward. As you know, the court complaint was filed last week concerning 10 Old Wenham Way and some activities up there that we would have had concerns about in terms of not complying with various town regulations. So we're hoping to bring that into compliance and that we can all move forward there. We will be presenting some more details at the work that's needed at Tux Point, in particular concerning the ramp and the floats. And at this point, it seems like the best approach will be to go forward with improvements for a new ramp and the float with pilings, and have that position so that it can be easily reused when we need to replace the piles and elevate the rotunda, but not to try to do that all at once. But again, we'll have more details on that in the subsequent meeting, and we'll have a presentation for you on the design and our hopes for some funding opportunities to help pay for that work. Just a couple of awards to let folks know about. The Senior Care actually decided to honor all the Council on Aging's, the directors. So that includes our Nancy Hammond for the work during COVID and helping our seniors get through what is obviously a challenging time. But the extra services and the extra efforts that Nancy for us and other directors and other communities have provided is well recognized by Senior Care's award for that, for their work. And in a similar vein, the Elder Brethren, Manchester Elder Brethren group, they have their annual Slade Eaton Award, normally given out to one individual, but the Brethrens decided to award to all citizens of Manchester for the, again, for helping neighbor during this pandemic, and recognition of many things from the small and mundane to the more significant in terms of helping out your neighbor, whether that be picking up some prescription drugs or doing a grocery shop or whatever it is. So I thought that was a very thoughtful and generous effort on the elder brethren. And we have the trophy with the plaque, and we'll be having that on display in Town Hall for this year until next year's award. So I wanted to make that known. You mentioned the forum this coming Thursday. That's at 6 p.m. A virtual forum, and there'll be also a survey that will be available during the forum and afterwards. I'm seeking input on what people's visions are for possible changes to the limited commercial district, that area that is on the north side of 128, Upper School Street area and on Upper Pine Street. And lastly, just a reminder to our business community, we do have grants that we are able to give out to small businesses. These are dubbed micro enterprises. These are 5 employees or less, including the owner. And there are grants that are available through the Community Block Grant Program. Federal dollars pass through the state. We teamed up with 22 other communities to put in an application to the state through the federal monies. And we've 23 communities, including Manchester, were included in the award. So we have a little over $60,000 that we can award to local businesses if they qualify. There are income limitations that they have to meet in order to qualify, but we certainly hope that people will take advantage of that. The first round deadline is coming up at the end of this week. There's a website that's available. Again, there's information. We emailed the local businesses, but if people didn't receive that, happy to get more information out. We're anticipating the second round, which will give more time for people to get their applications in. I hope to have that confirmed at a meeting on Wednesday that I'll be participating in. So we'll certainly push that out if there is a second round, which I'm anticipating that there will be in terms of a later deadline for applications. So that's available as well for folks. So that'll do me for tonight.
On the mediation item, had you wanted, or did the board want to have a board member at the mediation?
It would probably be helpful to have one of you, if you have the time, to be in attendance. And typically, the media will be trying to get to a yes. And so at a minimum, we should talk a bit more about it on the meeting of the 5th. We can do that in executive session in preparation for the mediation, but it probably would be helpful to have one of you to use a bit of as a sounding board for me to see if you're comfortable with the direction that the mediator is trying to take us.
Select somebody for that tonight, or wait until the 5th?
Let's do it tonight while you're here.
All right.
I would volunteer to do that if Greg felt that I could help out.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of you. I mean, it's not a particularly lovable project, but you certainly have a particular set of skills in this regard.
Yeah. Yep.
No, I'd welcome that, Jeff. Thank you.
All right, Greg. We can talk about where that's going to go.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
All right. And I have no other matters as might not have been anticipated by the chair. I just love the double negatives in there. And anybody else have any other comments or items that they need to raise tonight? And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
Yeah. Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes?
Mrs. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes.
If we must.
Yeah,
It's been
Don't.
lovely spending the evening with you.
yeah, likewise.
Mhm.
Mr. Bowling votes yes as well. And with that, we end this bi-weekly installment of the Manchester by the Sea show.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody. Thank you.